our speaker for today, Derek.
Okay, good morning, everyone. All right. So let me begin today by telling you a short story about an episode in my life. So when I was 13 to 14, not too long ago, okay, I was a very different person from what you see today. Today, I am probably a nerd or a geek, depending if you ask my wife or myself. And then at that time, okay, I was a small boy with aspirations to be a gangster. Okay? Now, needless to say, you will kind of guess where this story went and how it ended. Now, by the time I finished secondary 2, 14, okay, it wasn't working out for me, all right, because obviously I got hauled into the discipline master's office a lot, okay? It was almost like a second home. And then, I got into trouble for many, many things. So at the end of that year, I decided that, no, this is not going to work for me. So let's try the other route. Let's be a nerd, okay, and do well in my studies. Okay, now, one of the things I had to do at the end of secondary 2 is choose a subject combination, okay, for my O-levels. So there was this thing back then where you had to choose a religious study topic, okay? So my choices were Bible study or Confucius study in English or Chinese. Okay, so I decided that, okay, I'm not very good at this as a student, so let me consult my friends, okay, some of the better students in class. And they all say, Derek, Bible knowledge, straight A, very easy A, okay, you definitely can do it. Okay, even for you, I think it's an easy A. So I was like, okay. And then I was like, okay, just to be a little bit more careful, I asked them, so what exactly are we studying in Bible knowledge? And they say that you have two choices. You can study the Gospels, or you can study the book of Acts. Okay? And I thought like, okay, Gospels we know because I'm in a Catholic school. They always talk about the Gospels, okay, in my 6 to 8 years then, okay, I know the Gospels, so this should be easy. Okay, so I signed up, and I thought, expecting an easy A. Now, I think this was the second or third lesson when I did Bible knowledge, and I remember the story that we were talking about, the feeding of the 5,000, okay? And I remember the teacher talking about the story, the feeding of 5,000. At the end of it, there was, 12 baskets of food left, okay, even after everybody had eaten. And then he asked this question, okay, anybody know what is the meaning? Why 12 baskets, not 7, not whatever? And then everybody put their hand up, okay. I didn't because it's like, what 12? What's so special about 12? And then, obviously, my teacher picked me. Okay, and I said, I didn't know. And then so my teacher, who was very kind, okay, you next to him, why don't you answer? Oh, I think it represents the 12th tribe of Israel. And being the kind of student I was then, I blurted out, what 12 tribes? Who? Okay? And this kind of describes the exact issue when Luke was penning the gospel. Okay? So let's go through some very basic stuff about the book of Luke. Luke is probably the only Gentile author, okay, in the Bible. We know his profession is a doctor, and the language written for the book of Luke is Conic Greek. If you need a comparison, okay, we have common spoken English, we have professional English, and we have the Queen's English. So this is probably equivalent to either professional English or the Queen's English. And the target audience, besides Theophilus, that he said, who is most likely a Roman official who is a Christian, the general other audience that he included were Gentiles, who were not, like me, were not familiar with Jewish custom. Okay? So this is how he thought, or this is his target audience when he wrote the book of Luke. Now, with this in mind, in Luke chapter 1, verse 3, he said so himself. It's like, with this in mind, since I myself have investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus. Okay? So from here we know that Luke referred to many existing works then, probably including but not exhaustively, the book of Mark and Matthew. He probably referred to them for some of the accounts, and also probably interviewed some additional eyewitnesses that he knew about. So one of the very likely eyewitnesses would probably be Mary, because only in Luke you have a detailed record of Jesus' early life. You have how Mary felt when the angels visited her, and you have Mary and Elizabeth's song right at the beginning. Okay, so it is very likely that Mary was among the people that he interviewed when he wrote the book of Luke. Now, in the book of Acts, who he also written, okay, he also used the same thing. He referred to some earlier writings. He referred to some eyewitnesses, and in some of the accounts, you see that he shifted from them to us, they to we, because he was there firsthand to witness some of these events. So now comes an important thing that I think we should talk about is these two books, okay, although written in a very orderly manner, is not strictly chronological. Okay? Now, basically, what it means is, okay, the authors then, it was the style of that time to record events based on themes and topics rather than a strict chronological event. Okay, so it's not like from the earliest to the latest. They might mix it up a little bit just to illustrate their point. So the strict and linear chronological order that we know in history today only started much, much later in the 16th century during the Renaissance. But before that, most historical writings are based on theme or topics that the author wants to illustrate. So just remember this as we go through the book of Luke. Now, one very good example of this, what we call thematic approach of writing, okay, can be seen here. Okay, the temptation of Jesus is found both in Matthew and Luke. Okay, so they all have the same temptations: physical needs, turning stone to bread; divine tests, leaping from the temple; worldly power, worshipping Satan for the kingdom of the world. So they all have these three. But the sequence of how they are recorded in each book is slightly different. Okay, Matthew started with bread, temple, kingdom, while in the book of Luke, Luke wrote bread, kingdom, temple, in a slightly different sequence. Now, so the most common questions I get from people who read this is like, who got it wrong? Okay, no, they didn't get it wrong, but rather, okay, if you look at the theme of how Matthew wrote the book, is basically Matthew is building a climactic order of earthly kingdom from a high place, okay, to fit his target audience, which was mainly Jews. Okay, and Luke moved from a desert to a mountain and, accumulated at Jerusalem, okay, reflecting his theme, okay, of the book of Luke for a more Gentile audience, which is probably unfamiliar with Jewish custom. So this is one simple example that this topic is actually quite complicated and deep, but we won't go through that today. All right. Now, some unique themes and focus that we find in the book of Luke. Okay, I'll go through them. Basically, Luke emphasized a lot on the compassion for the marginalized, the poor, okay, the outcasts, the sinners. Luke also focused a lot on what the Holy Spirit did in some of these events. Okay, he focused on some other themes like the great reversal, like rich person suddenly become poor and so on, or the proud being humbled. Wealth and stewardship. Luke spent a lot of time on the role of money and wealth, earthly wealth. Okay, he also, probably for the benefit of his Gentile audience, included a Samaritan focus. Okay, the Good Samaritan, okay, is in his book. And Luke also wrote about the prominent role for women, as followers and supporters of Jesus. So these are pretty unique if you compare the four Gospels. Okay, for those who just like statistics and trivia, okay, so 35% of the material in Luke is unique to Luke, not found anywhere else. Okay, about 35%, I give and take. Now, there were 7 miracles that Luke wrote about that was not covered in Matthew and Mark. Okay, the Holy Spirit played a very prominent role in the 7 miracles listed here. Okay, Luke mentioned 13 people by name, which are not mentioned in any other Gospels. Yanfen actually put in this list just to make sure that I'm saying the right thing. Okay, you can have fun with this. And Luke also records 18 parables that are not found anywhere else in other Gospels. Okay? Now, so there are a lot more in these that I won't go into detail in the interest of time, but have fun with this. So, what we are covering today is from Luke chapter 15 to chapter 19. Okay, I have included here, which I won't go through today, the major themes in each chapter, okay, and what is also unique, okay, in the book of Luke compared to other Gospels. So feel free to refer to the slides later on and go through it for your own study. And so I have 2 points today. So what we're going to do today is a little bit different and related to what I just spoke about. We're going to look at 2 themes. And we're going to look at 2 accounts in each theme that's in these 4 chapters that's unique and not found in other Gospels. Okay? And just to see, what is some of the themes and message that Luke was trying to put across. Now, the first point, or the first theme, is repentance as renewal. Okay? This is a very strong theme that occurs even in this very 5 chapters rather. And you are probably familiar with some of these stories or accounts that we're going to go through. So, theme number 1. Okay. In Luke 15, we have this parable of the prodigal son, or in my version of the Bible, the parable of the lost son. Okay. This chapter begins with Jesus with a crowd with 2 groups of people. Okay. The tax collectors, sinners, and also the more religious people, the Pharisees and the lawgivers. Okay, and Jesus was addressing this crowd. And he began that chapter with 2 small stories before he came to the main story. He started with the parable of the lost sheep and then the lost coin. Okay, I think it's intentional. Parable of the lost sheep is an outdoor story, which will be appealing to the men. And the parable of the lost coin occurs indoors, in a house, which would have been appealing to women. So, the theme that he told in these 2 short stories is basically, okay, you are kind of alone when you are lost. Okay, when you go search for the lost sheep, the lost coin, you're kind of alone. But when you find it, there's great rejoicing and there's great celebration in both these stories. So this prepped the audience for the main story that Jesus wants to tell in this chapter. Okay, so in Luke 15, verse 11 to 20, it says here, Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to the father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to these fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, in some other translation where he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." So they began to celebrate. Okay, we will stop here. Okay, that's the other half of the story, okay, which I did not cover here, but we'll stop here for now. Okay. Now, in Jewish tradition, some context, when a father, after he dies, when he divides the inheritance, okay, usually this is how it goes, okay. The oldest will get a double portion, and the rest will be divided equally to the rest of the children, sons mainly. Okay, so in this scenario, what will happen is, okay, the oldest son will get the property, all the property will be divided into 3 parts. The older son will get 2, and the younger son will get 1. So this was what the younger son was asking for. So there are 2 ways to do this. One is you get it after the father has died, or, if the father is still alive, he could choose to do it, okay, and be virtually retired, okay, and divide the inheritance to his son while he was still alive. Okay, now, if you think about it, if I was a father, okay, and my son said this to me, okay, my answer, without thinking too much about it, would have been no. Okay, because, for my son to be asking for something like that, I would kind of get a feel of what he would do and what, he's going to do with the money, his character probably, and I would know a little bit about him, or what the consequence of giving him the money. Now, but here, okay, God, who is a father, okay, was kind of big-hearted enough to say, okay, go, and gave it to him. Probably knowing full well what would happen, okay, and knowing full well what the son is going to do with the money. The account here says he went to a faraway city, okay, from probably Galilee, and the city he went to is probably Antioch, okay, one of the 3 main cities in the Roman world: Antioch, Rome, and Alexandria. Now, the reason why he would go to a place like this is because Galilee was not in modern terms, not a happening place. Okay, it probably did not have all the facilities for wild living that the younger son desires. So he probably went to a city like Antioch, okay, and there he partied. He partied very hard. Antioch is a non-Jewish city, so I think the entertainment or the avenues of pleasure available to him was probably a lot wider and a lot more sinful, I guess. Now, the Bible mentions that he squandered his wealth. Okay? 1/3 of the wealth squandered. It can be done if you try. And engage in wild living. And then a recession or a drought hit. And by that time, he has probably spent most of his money with nothing to show for it. Okay, then he was like, okay, I still want this life. I still want to stay here. So out of desperation, he hired himself out to a local citizen, probably a non-Jew, to take care of his herd of pigs. Now, something that we often miss here is how Jews generally don't associate with pigs. It's considered unclean, dirty. Okay? Orthodox Jews will not even mention the word pig. So just to illustrate a point, there's this story that, that during a religious meeting, a cardinal and a rabbi sat next to each other, and then they were having dinner conversation. And the cardinal kind of stooped over and asked the rabbi, "I don't suppose I could interest you in a ham sandwich?" And then the rabbi very calmly turned to the cardinal and says, "Yes, I'll take that at your wedding banquet." This kind of illustrates how the Jews feel about pork and how serious an issue it is. So for the younger son to actually take care of pigs, okay, as a profession, despite all his Jewish upbringing, is a sign of desperation and also kind of the pit. He has hit bottom. He has lost all self-respect. He just have to do something to carry on and nothing else. He even desired to eat the food given to the pigs. For a Jew, this is probably like the bottom. You cannot go any lower. So, here, the young son came to his senses, as is translated in this version. He realized two things. That, the blessedness of those, the servants, who stayed home, and the unworthiness of himself to go home. Okay? Now, if you think about it, these thoughts are never about anyone else save himself. So he rationalized that, he'd still think that I'm at the pit, but I think I got still some leverage to bargain. I'll go home, I'll tell my father that I've sinned against him, I've sinned against God, I've sinned against him, and, I am not fit to be your son, but, maybe I can do some work for you. You could hire me. Not once did he think about the father's feelings, about how he would feel having a son as a servant in the house. Okay, but one thing he did right, okay, well, these are all very good thoughts, okay. Thoughts have never saved anybody. So one thing he did right is he chose to return. And so as he approached home, we know the story, okay. The father saw him far away, ran up to him, said, "Son, you actually smell very bad. Maybe take a bath and then I'll give you a hug." That would be what I would say, okay? Because at this stage, the son was probably not in very good shape. No money, no food, living with pigs, cannot have smelled very good, okay? But instead, as we know, the father kind of gave him a hug, smell, dirty and everything, and says, and the son went into his prepared speech. Okay, "Father, I've sinned against heaven and earth." And he did not get to finish. So the father kind of interrupted him. He's like, "Fine. Grab a rope, okay? Grab a ring, grab shoes." Now, if you need some explanation about the significance of shoes, you can refer to Harry Potter. If you know the house elf Dobby, okay? As a slave, as Dobby, and as a slave of the time, they are not given shoes. So the sandals was a sign to remove him from being a slave back towards being a son. Okay? And you notice that, okay, if I was a father welcoming back a son who has taken my money and in his current state probably has spent all the money, I would say that, "Okay, great, come back home. Let's see how you do in 3 months, and then we talk about what to do with you." Nope, that did not happen, fortunately, for the younger son. The father restored him to sonship straight away, okay, without any conditions, without any probation given. And this is a very strong theme, okay, in the book of Luke, where basically, if you return, whatever your motives, if you turn to God, God will take you. Okay? It doesn't matter if your motives are wrong. It doesn't matter if your motives are for yourself. God will sort it out. But it's important that you turn to God. This kind of reminds me of my, coming to church story. Okay? I came to church because I liked the girl that invited me. Not so much because I was interested in the Bible, or not so much because I was interested in a Christian life. Okay? Talk about completely wrong motivation. Now, obviously, I'm here today, and unfortunately, my friend that invited me is not. Okay, and God definitely sorted out my motives over the years and purified it. So, if you choose to turn to God, whatever your motives might be, okay, God will take you. And God will sort out your motives as He does with every one of us. Now, the title of today's sermon is The Tale of Two lost sons. Okay? Who is the other son? Well, not the elder son in this case, but there is another son, lost son within these chapters, and that is the account of Zacchaeus in Luke 19. So in Luke 19, in verse 1 to 10, it reads here, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. Now a man named Zacchaeus was there. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to get a look at Jesus, but being a short man, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, because Jesus was going to pass that way. And when Jesus came to that place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down quickly, because I must stay at your house today. So he came down quickly and welcomed Jesus joyfully. And when the people saw it, they all complained. He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. But Zacchaeus stopped and said to the Lord, Look, Lord, half of my possessions I now give to the poor. And if I have cheated anyone of anything, I'm paying back 4 times as much. Then Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this household, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. So some context here, and I think many of us already know this. Okay, tax collectors. Why are they so hated in biblical times? Okay, tax collectors is an official position in the Roman government. The Romans did not have time to collect taxes themselves, so they appoint agents. So this is what tax collectors are. Okay, and each agent or tax collector is assigned a quota of tax to collect. Okay, as long as they give that quota to the Roman government, okay, all is good. If they choose to collect more than what they have to, okay, it is agreed that they can keep the money for themselves. Okay? And basically, when you are in Roman territory, you deal with both Jews and Gentiles. So they collect taxes from both, and they associate with Gentiles, which is something very kind of a big no-no in Jewish society. Okay? Now, given all these conditions, what most people will do is, okay, I'll collect as much as I can. Okay? I have thugs or gangster, the thing I want to be when I was young, to enforce this. If anybody attacks me, I have the Roman legion behind me, because the Romans were very serious about taxation and money due to them. They have the authority to utilize the Roman military to enforce their collection of tax, whatever they decide to be. They also can seize assets and homes if somebody cannot pay. So you can imagine that if, let's say today, a foreign power to conquer Singapore, and they appoint tax collectors, which will be fellow Singaporeans, and your fellow Singaporeans are shaking you down for money, okay, and you know they are shaking you down because they don't have to collect that much. But you can't do anything about it because the military of the foreign power is backing them. Imagine the feeling of betrayal by a fellow countryman, the hatred because of corruption, and also the injustice that is bound to follow because of greed. So this is basically how a tax collector is perceived. And if you read the passage we just read, Zacchaeus is not only a tax collector, he was a tax collector, chief tax collector. Okay, must have done very well to be promoted to that rank. And if you look a little bit deeper, he was the chief tax collector in Jericho. Now, Jericho, we know, okay, probably we know more about Jericho from the account of how Joshua destroyed Jericho. This Jericho we're talking about has been rebuilt. Jericho has always been rebuilt because it sits at a place where there's an oasis. It is also at the crossroad of trade route between Jordan and Israel. It was always going to be a very prosperous place. So being a chief tax collector in Jericho, the super rich city, okay, that would, be rebuilt no matter what. Basically, he has done very well for himself. Must have been very driven to be appointed to that role. So, think about it. First question about this account. So, being a very rich, successful tax collector, okay, probably a billionaire, why did Zacchaeus want to see Jesus? Curiosity, maybe, but for him to be this desperate to climb up a tree as a billionaire, maybe a bit more. So, this is my speculation. Okay, it could be that a memory of what his parents did. His parents was probably religious, and I'll explain why. Probably a memory of what his parents did, okay, may have occurred to him, and he remembered. Now, why I say the parents were probably religious is because if you look up the meaning of the name Zacchaeus, it means innocent, pure, righteous. The parents probably gave the name Zacchaeus because, they wanted him to be a good boy. Okay? And, when parents give names, usually they want the kids to live up to that name in some way. Okay? Even when we give ourselves name, we tend to want to live up to the ideals of that name. I gave myself the name of Derek because it means ruler of people and, conquerors of nations. You can see where that was going. Okay, and some parents name their kids Genius. Okay, very, very hard name to live up to. So we can kind of probably conclude that the parents probably had, great hopes for Zacchaeus. And we know from his role in that time is probably didn't live up to it. Lived a very sinful life, lived a corrupt life, to be this rich as a tax collector, to be a chief tax collector. So, probably a memory of what his parents did, okay, came to him, and he wanted to see who this Jesus is. He probably would have heard that, somebody like Matthew, the tax collector, also was one of Jesus' disciples. He probably would have heard that Jesus actually dined and wined with sinners and tax collectors. So he wanted to see. And he desperately wanted to see. Now, I think there are, in his encounter with Jesus, there's probably 7 surprises. Okay? So, first surprise, when Jesus walked by, look up. Jesus noticed him. Not only that, okay, Jesus addressed and talked to him. And then the third surprise is Jesus knew his name, though they have never met. Jesus called him, even though probably nobody wanted anything to do with him in his society. And Jesus accepted him for who he was. We need to go to your house. Okay? Did not say that if you quit as a tax collector, I will go to your house. Did not say that if you are not corrupt and you give back the money, I'll go to your house. No, Jesus accepted him for who he was. Jesus befriended him and went for a meal in his house. If you think about it, Jesus made a very illogical choice. Because by accepting a dinner invitation to his house, Jesus would probably have alienated most of the people around him. Which, if you want to reach out to great groups of people, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do something that's so repulsive. And Jesus obviously preferred him at that time because going to his house, like I said, means losing most of the people following Jesus. So, throughout this account, okay, nothing has been recorded of, basically, what is required. Jesus didn't ask him to repent. He says, I'm just going to dinner to your house. Okay? But I think the significance of this, based on the surprises I listed, must have moved Zacchaeus on a very personal level. He did 2 things. He gave half of his possessions immediately to the poor. The word used in this translation is now. And in other translations, it's the present tense. Not I will, but I am giving, or I now give. And given it is not likely this is something that he did before, okay, being an outcast, being a chief tax collector, okay, and he gave restitution to those he has wronged. He has chosen the most severe penalty to pay back. So something about Jewish law, if you commit robbery and you return the goods, okay, your penalty is 20% interest of the value of the goods. If you commit robbery and you have lost the goods you robbed, the penalty is 50% interest on the value of things you robbed. This penalty that he imposed on himself, which is 300%, is the highest penalty of the law, reserved for robberies with violence. Okay, and this is the significance of the penalty he imposed on himself. So here, you see that, okay, he didn't do very much. He just wanted to see Jesus. Okay, he just wanted to turn. Hopefully, let's see what happens. Okay, maybe things will change. Maybe I can be better, but not likely, but maybe. Let's just climb a tree and see what happens. But as we see, regardless of your motive, Jesus will take you if you turn to him. And God will sort out your motives. And so this is a very powerful theme that sometimes we, because of our constant reading of these accounts, and these two stories are, very often preached about, that we do not recognize that how precious this is for people that are looking for some meaning, they are looking for God. And to the Gentiles that Luke was writing to, this would have been a very powerful story. And this theme, you can see, is not only in these two accounts, but in many other accounts in the book of Luke. So, repentance as renewal, a key theme in the book of Luke. Next, we take a look at another theme, stewardship of gifts. Okay, we start in Luke 16, another account that's only found in Luke and nowhere else. It's a parable of the shrewd manager. So here it begins. Jesus also said to the disciples, there was a rich man who was informed of accusations that his manager was wasting his assets. So he called the manager in and said to him, "What is this I hear about you? Turn in the accounts of your administration, because you can no longer be my manager." Then the manager said to himself, "What should I do, since my master is taking my position away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I'm too ashamed to beg. I know what to do so that when I'm put out of management, people will welcome me into their homes." So he contacted his master's debtor one by one. He said to the first, "How much do you owe my master?" The man replied, 100 measures of olive oil. The manager said to him, "Take your bill, sit down quickly, and write 50. Discount." Okay? Then he said to another, "And how much do you owe?" The second man replied, 100 measures of wheat. The manager said to him, "Take your bill and write 80. The master commended the dishonest manager because he has acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their contemporaries than the people of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourself by how you use worldly wealth, so that when it runs out, you will be welcomed into eternal homes." Okay, now, this is a rather unique passage because if you think about it, there are no good guys in this story. Okay? They are all crooks. Okay, now, for anybody in a manager's shoe, there's always two options. Okay? If my boss confronts me with, mismanagement of money, he has basically these two choices usually. He can run with whatever money he has on hand. Okay? Or he can plan for the future. So he obviously decided to plan for the future a bit. So he changed the IOUs essentially. And then all the merchants knew what he was trying to do. Okay? Because, they immediately take care. They say that, okay, if you're going to offer me this, I'll take it. All right? And something like honor among thieves, okay, when you are out of this job, I will take care of you. Quid pro quo. Now, the surprising thing is, his master, okay, commended him, okay, for acting shrewdly. Not because he cheated his money, he's not commended for that. But his master probably is a businessman himself who probably thinks along the same lines. So that's why I say there's no good guys in this story. Okay, now, here's the thing. Clarification number one, okay? Jesus is definitely not teaching us that it's okay to be dishonest or cheat, all right? But Jesus says this, okay? In verse 8, he says that the master commended the dishonest manager because he acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their contemporaries than the people of light. Basically, Jesus is saying that, okay, in dealing with this world, sometimes the world can teach you, Christians, something that works better. Okay? So what is the thing here that works better? Okay? Probably these two things. Here, the manager obviously decided that people are more important than money or things. And the future is more important than the present. Okay, because if you look at this and the passage that follows, it makes sense. Oh, alignment went up. Okay. In verse 9, it says, I tell you, make friends for yourself on how you use worldly wealth, so that when it runs out, you will be welcomed into eternal homes. So, here, a second clarification is, this is chapter 16, following chapter 15 about the parable of the prodigal son. Okay, the younger son obviously spent all his money, okay, was very generous with his wealth probably, but ended up with no friends. So, is Jesus pointing to that? No. Because of this one word in verse 9, you will be welcomed into eternal homes, not earthly homes. So, the question here that Jesus is asking is, are you using your wealth to make friends for eternity? So, how this looks like in our present world is maybe the contribution for the poor that you put in, maybe the money that you contributed towards mission trips, maybe money you put in to help somebody in need, and that somebody was moved by your kindness and can see God in that. So Jesus is saying that, probably. And I know this for all of us, that, at some point, our money will run out, either because we spent it all or because we cannot access it anymore. When you die, you can no longer write another check. You cannot go to the ATM. You cannot use PayLah. Okay? Money would have no meaning to you when you die. And at that time, will you have friends in eternity? Okay? And this is basically what this passage is trying to say. If I were to summarize this passage, it's probably by a quote from Jim Elliot, an American missionary. And he says here, he is no fool who gives away that he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. And that perfectly describes this story of how you use wealth in this world to gain friends that you cannot lose in eternity. And we go to the second account that talks about the same thing, but in a different way. Parable of the 10 minas. In Luke 19, verse 11 to 19, it says here, while they were listening to this, he went on to tell them a parable, because he was near Jerusalem and the people thought that the kingdom of God was going to appear at once. He said, a man of noble birth went to a distant country to have himself appointed king and then to return. So he said to 10 of his servants and gave them 10 minas, put this money to work, he said, until I come back. But his subjects hated him and sent a delegation after him to say, "We don't want this man to be our king." Verse 15, he was made king, however, and returned home. Then he sent for the servants to whom he had given the money, in order to find out what they had gained with it. The first one came and said, "Sir, your miners have earned 10 more." "Well done, my good servant," the master replied. "Because you have been trustworthy in a very small matter, take charge of 10 cities." The second came and said, "Sir, your miner has earned 5 more." His master answered, "You take charge of 5 cities." Then another servant came and said, "Sir, here is your mina. I have kept it laid away in a piece of cloth. I was afraid of you because you are a hard man. You take out what you did not put in and reap what you did not sow." His master replied, "I will judge you by your own hands, you wicked servant. You knew, did you, that I am a hard man, taking out what I did not put in and reaping what I did not sow? Why then didn't you put my money on deposit, so that when I came back, I could have collected it with interest?" Then he said to those standing by, "Take his mina away from him and give it to the one who has 10 minas." "Sir," they say, "he already has 10." He replied, "I tell you that everyone who has, more will be given. But as the one who has nothing, even what they have will be taken away. But those enemies of mine who did not want me to be king over them, bring them here and kill them in front of me." Now, here, Jesus is using a historical account that is probably very familiar to the people of that time. This scenario exactly describes, the son of Herod the Great, Archelaus. So what happened is Herod the Great, who is most well known for killing all the firstborns, to stop Jesus from being king, he died, and his son Archelaus, wanted to inherit his kingdom. But because the territory was in Roman control, you can only be the king of that territory if you have the Caesar's blessing. So he left for Rome. He traveled to Rome, basically to petition the Roman government or Caesar to appoint him king over Judea. And this is exactly the same story that Jesus is trying to use, and the people who have been very familiar with it. So to cut the long story short, Archelaus was appointed king of Judea, but he didn't get everything. He got half of his father's kingdom. The other half was divided, was given to his 2 brothers. And so basically, when he came back, obviously when he went to Rome, there were people that didn't want him to be king. So they sent delegations to Rome as well to petition that, don't appoint him king. The Roman Empire will suffer if he is appointed king. So this is exactly what happened. And so when he came back and he was appointed king, you can imagine what happened to these people that did the other petition. Now, this is a familiar account to the people of that time, and Jesus used this account to illustrate a point here. We, Christians, are given the gift of salvation and some other gifts in our lives. We are expected to do something with those gifts. It's very clear. And depending on what we do, we may get additional responsibilities in heaven to look after. Now, when my wife was vetting these slides, her immediate reaction is, "Wait, are you saying that we still have to work in heaven?" I thought heaven, no more work. That's the whole point. Go to heaven, no more work. I can understand my wife's feeling and I can sympathize with it, but this is what the Bible says, so don't come after me about it. Now, what is not very clear is, there's no mention of what this responsibility will, in what form it will take. So, I don't know if it's exactly like the work we understand here or it is some other form. But needless to say, there will be some allocation of responsibilities in heaven when we get there. And to me, this makes perfect sense logically. If you are not interested to administer the gift that God has given you on earth, what makes you think you have any interest in managing responsibilities in heaven? You will still get to heaven, but would you be really interested in managing anything that now, I mean, on earth, you're not doing anything with it, so what makes you think you'll change when you get to heaven? And this is the point. So the point of this theme is stewardship of gifts. We are all given various gifts. We are all given various things in this life, okay, for a reason. Okay, one of the very dominant themes in Luke is basically the gifts, the money, the wealth, the talents, okay, that you have, okay, is supposed to do something for the kingdom, and you'll be called to account for it. And this is something that I think, at least for me, it didn't really occur very often to me. It's like what I do, what my success, mine. But no, not mine. God's. And you'll be called to account for it. So, today we explore two themes in the book of Luke. Obviously, the two accounts are not exhaustive of these two themes, okay, but it's a start for you to start looking at the various dominant themes in Luke. And also, look at the chapters, not so much in the order that is arranged in the Bible today, but to look at it, how everything comes together, the point of what these themes are trying to get. Okay? And I leave you with these two questions to ponder from today's lesson. Okay? If you are not a Christian today, you are definitely most welcome to know God. Okay? If you turn to God, He will take you. I guarantee it. Okay? Now, good thoughts never save anybody. Something that you can action or you can do is to start studying the Bible. And at the risk of sounding like Harry Potter again, help is available to any who needs it for studying the Bible. Okay? And for us, for those of us who are Christians already, what are you doing with your gifts? Okay? And this is a conversation that you need to have with God. Okay? I don't think anybody is going to judge you or anybody can judge you about what you do with your gifts. This is really strictly a conversation between you and God. All right? I hope the lesson was helpful to you today. Thank you.